going to try to take the emotions out, disassociate myself, and just try to explain what happened with this team tonight against the Nets. To be honest, I thought the first half was pretty solid. I thought that some adjustments were made by Steve. Obviously, there were some different rotations tonight. I thought the second unit held up really well in that second quarter. The combinations looked a little different. He rolled out a lineup of Pods, GP2, Lindy Waters, Andrew Wiggins, and Kevon Looney. And the most interesting thing of all, Potts was running a whole lot of pick and roll with the ball in his hands. He looked more confident. He was playmaking. The offense was simplified. That unit got extended run in the second quarter, and they actually won out 17-5. So that was pretty impressive on both ends of the floor. Some people were complaining that, Steph Curry was not playing enough minutes. I think he came back with maybe a little bit under 5 minutes left in the second quarter. And yes, that is a little casual. Steph is not playing enough minutes considering what's been happening over the last few games. But I'm not going to overly complain about something when the lineup that's out there has a 17-5 advantage. And it gives a guy like Pods a great sense of confidence that he's been needing for a long time. This is how you get guys out of funk and reward them when they're playing really well. That's okay. Ultimately, the Warriors went into halftime with a 9-point lead. Not bad. The thing is, I think about this game and the game before and the game before that, and the Warriors continue to play these teams that are just missing all kinds of bodies. Obviously, the Pelicans, they were decimated with injuries, right? And then you got the Spurs, who were missing Sohan, Devin Vassell, and Keldon Johnson. And then tonight, the Nets were missing Claxton, Ben Simmons, Cam Johnson. These are situations the Warriors should absolutely capitalize on. And it looked like they were going to in that third quarter. The Warriors got off to a 19-10 start in the first 5 minutes with the starting unit. Steph Curry was starting to get a little frisky, hitting a 30-footer in transition. It was an and-one play. And these are the types of things where you get a Curry flurry moment. And that third quarter is where he has to be aggressive to really put other teams away so that by the fourth quarter, it's pretty much a blowout. And then he has the option of being able to sit out the fourth quarter, and that's how you rest him. The problem is Steve Kerr got cute again and, decided to take out Trace after the first 5 minutes of the game, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would the team be on a 19-10 run with all the momentum in the world, and then you take out one of the key guys that has allowed your team to play that way? He wants to do this thing where you play 11, 12-man rotation, so then everybody got to come in earlier and all this junk. And okay, you want to do that in the first half, fine. But in the third quarter, when your team has momentum and they're trying to kill the other team, you don't get casual and cute about who's on the floor. And you don't destroy the momentum of that group yourself. The other team is supposed to overcome the momentum that they created. And Steve Kerr just kind of does it for the other team. Next thing you know, the Nets regain momentum. They go on a quick 7-0 run. Next thing you know, the Nets go on a crazy run where they are outscoring the Warriors by 19-6 in the third quarter. And it only got worse in the fourth quarter when they got outscored 41-28. A depleted Nets team, and the Warriors are at home. They got a day off, so no excuse of, we're still overly tired. Everybody else is playing a lot of games too. It's not just the Warriors, right? So at the end of the day, it's yet another fundamental Steve Kerr casual decisions and just lackadaisical. He just doesn't have like a killer mentality. How do you just ice out and kill the momentum of your own team like that? It's hard not to get frustrated when you're rooting for this team to succeed at the highest level and you got a coach that is just doing the most casual things in the world. He's still running an 11-man rotation, which is why Steph Curry is only playing 29 minutes. Wiggins is playing 32 minutes. Draymond is playing 28 minutes. Steve just doesn't seem to have any sense of urgency about anything. And when you have an unserious demeanor and attitude about how you approach each and every game, these are the results that you're going to get. Think about it. Is there any other coach on any other team, good or bad, that you can think of that consistently and persistently blows 30-point leads, 20-point leads, 17-point leads the way this guy does? I just don't see how you can blame anybody else. Constantly putting the team in suboptimal situations, and he's still under this spell, romanticizing the notion that somehow he can still go with these small lineups and think that that's somehow good enough to close games. It's not. I've been screaming that since last season when they were putting Chris Paul in the closing lineup next to Steph Curry, Klay Thompson at the 3. They have no POA, they have no rebounding, not enough size, not enough force. And Steve is just so married to his ideology, he just doesn't seem to know how to let it all go and just adjust with the roster and the group of guys that he has and recognize, hey, if you do actually have smaller guys, but they can really play those positions super well and rebound and do all the fundamental things that are required of those positions, then by all means. But if you don't have that, then just go traditional. Stop trying to match the smallness of the other teams, because usually when you try to match the smallness of the other teams, the Warriors end up being worse, especially to close a game. To close a game, your defense has to be the strongest. You must have the strongest rim protection possible. You must have the best rebounding possible. Those are two prerequisites. If you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to stop the other team. Even if you do get a stop, chances are the other team is going to grab an offensive rebound and it's just going to tire you out and wear you down. And you know, I've been warning you guys since the Pelicans game. Hey, if he doesn't fix up and get more serious, this amazing start to the season is going to erode really fast and they're going to start dropping in the standings really fast. And that's exactly what you're seeing now. You know, the Nets were 7-10 coming into this game. The Spurs were 8-8 coming into the last game. And obviously the Pelicans, they're like, what, 3-12 or something? And these are the bottom-feeding teams that the Warriors have trouble closing against now, ever since Steve Kerr switched up what they were doing from the earlier part of the season. It's like clockwork. I'm telling you, I know exactly when this team is about to implode and just start going downhill based on the things that Steve Kerr does. And I really can't help but feel like, did Draymond precipitate this somehow? Like, you know, after that Mavs game, you guys remember the Mavs game where Steph Curry is screaming into the camera and telling the whole world whose house this is. You guys remember that, right? So after that game, Draymond got on his podcast talking with his co-host Baron Davis, and Baron Davis is, you know, telling Draymond, hey, you got some dogs in that coaching staff. And so Draymond started to break that down, and he's talking about how Terry Stotts is the offense. You know, he didn't just say that Terry Stotts has helped tremendously in terms of what they do on offense. He literally said that Terry Stotts is the offense.
Get your coaching up.
Like Stack, hey man, I'm telling you, man, Stackhouse to this Stackhouse.
Hey man, y'all got Stackhouse, Stouts over there. He an offensive mastermind. Yeah. Hey bro, y'all got some dogs over there.
Hey, when what the additions that they've made this coaching staff, Stotts, like you said, he's an offensive mastermind, and it's his offense.
Now you have to ask yourself, do you think that Steve Kerr tunes in to the Draymond Green's podcast? I have a feeling that he does. Because why would he not care about what Draymond has to say about this team and the game of basketball? I'm sure Steve doesn't listen to a lot of people, but I feel like Draymond would be one of those people that he will listen to. And what I noticed is that these guys, when they were talking about the success of the team to that point, they credited pretty much everybody but Steve Kerr. Talking about Terry Stotts is the offense and Jerry Stackhouse is the defense. Well, then what does that make Steve Kerr? Why does he even need to be there? Right? So call it a conspiracy theory if you want, but the very next game against the Grizzlies, Steph Curry comes out and takes 2 shots in the first 11 minutes of the game. Ever since then, he's been on passive mode. And I just don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't know, man. I just can't help but think that there's something deeply wrong with this guy, Steve Kerr. He's just unserious. And as you can see, I am the most serious. I break this team down from top to bottom, every single player. Every little nuance, good and bad, all the fundamental issues that they get right and they get wrong. You see the level of intensity that I break this team down when I speak of them. And it's because I am trying to make sure that this team is maximized in every way possible. And Steve just isn't on that energy. He doesn't care about maximization. He's just really, really casual. At this point, I wouldn't mind seeing him take like 5 to 10 games off and just let Terry Stotts take over for a little while and see what that looks like, because something tells me that if that happens, that the Warriors would go back to being the best team in the league. Having said all that, I do think that he's close to figuring out how to play everything in a more balanced way. I saw signs tonight that were pretty positive. And to be fair to the Nets, they were very forceful, and Dennis Schroeder was just impossible to guard tonight. The guy is a speed demon, and it's hard to stay in front of him when he has his shot going. Well, that team is pretty difficult to stop. And I feel like when some of these teams are missing some of their key guys, actually the most intense defensive guys end up replacing those players, right? The guys who are maybe not as good offensively, but they are dogs on defense. And these guys end up into their rotation, and suddenly they look really much more forceful than they would normally look even with their starters. But again, to try to remedy this situation, because the Warriors, this situation, this roster, it's not going anywhere. They have to fix what's going on from within. And I think one of the biggest keys to it at this point, cut the 11-man, 12-man rotation stuff out. That's enough of that. The starters need to start playing more starters minutes. Trace needs to get more of an opportunity to ring up the score in a game like tonight. Again, like I said, they got out to a 19-10 lead, and they had an 18-point lead. They were on the cusp of completely blowing out the Nets, and then Steve iced out his own team with this casual rotation, taking Trace out, who was a key part of what they were doing on both ends of the floor in the first 5 minutes of the game. You don't ice out a lineup like that in just 5 minutes. It doesn't make any sense. And he needs to prioritize size again to maximize the potential of their defense. The smaller he goes, the more vulnerable their defense becomes. And we're seeing that over and over and over again. Even in the first 11 games, when some of their leads would erode, it's because Steve would go with these smaller lineups where there is no power forward on the floor other than some guy masquerading as one. We basically never see the Kyle Anderson and Kevon Looney combination anymore, even though we saw it in the earlier part of the season and they held up really well defensively. So these are some of the things that Steve has to consider going back to. And again, to close the game, it can't be Steph Curry, Paz, GP2, Wiggins, and Draymond. Where is the rebounding? Who is the power forward? Where is the rim protection? You're catering to what the other team is doing instead of forcing them to adjust to what you're doing. A great team and a great coach forces the other team to make adjustments instead of you being the one having to match what they're doing. Because then you're playing their game and you become vulnerable to what they are doing. Anyway, if you take a look at the schedule for the foreseeable future, things do not get any easier. So, Steve needs to get much more serious if he wants his team to recover from this 6-game stretch where it's just been a complete and utter disaster. He needs to let go of whatever thing that might have been hurting his ego or something like this and get back to what they were doing in the first 11 games. That team and that group still exists. Steve Kerr just has to get more serious at the end of the day. The Nets, I think they went on something insane like a 33-11 run, something like that between the third quarter into the fourth quarter. And he just continued to sit Steph out. He took Steph out at the 4.5 minute mark of the third quarter while the Nets were going on a run and never made an adjustment. And he didn't bring Steph back until later in the fourth quarter. How does that make any sense? Again, there's just no sense of urgency. He needs to find it. Guess who they play next? OKC Thunder. Good luck. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.